Welcome to But For Real, a variety show podcast co-hosted by two therapists who also happen to be loudmouth feminists. I'm Valerie, your resident elder millennial child-free cat lady.
And I'm Emerson, your resident chronically online Gen Z brat. And on the show, we'll serve up a new episode every other week that will take you on a wild ride through the cultural zeitgeist, mental health, and beyond.
You'll definitely laugh and TBH sometimes maybe cry a little because this is a silly and serious show.
Buckle up, my friends, and let's get into today's episode.
Hi.
Hello.
We're back.
We are.
I'm so glad to be here.
I know. We just had a morning kiki with the team. You know.
Love our monthly team meeting. So fun.
So fun. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, intro question for today to kick us off. If you could tell your 14-year-old self specifically something you now know about bodies or body image, what would you say to her?
Well, it's funny that you chose that age.
Yeah.
That bitch has some issues,
honey.
I'll say.
Why is being 14 the trenches?
Oh my God. Like worse than almost anything.
16, you know? Like, dang.
So I would say, and of course, you know, she wouldn't listen.
Oh, sure.
But I would say something to the effect of like, there are so many more important things about you.
Yes.
Like, I know this feels so important right now.
Yeah.
But it's really not. It's not that deep.
It's not that deep.
What about you?
I feel like mine is kind of along the same lines and or just beginning to like, again, she wouldn't listen. But just to kind of start like talking about like worth, like I really would want for her to know that like the worthiness is not tied to how you look. It's like beyond, it's so much deeper. Like the soul part of you, like your purpose, the passionate part, like the things that people love about you have nothing to do with what you look like. And like for a reason,
right?
You know, the worthiness is not all tied into just how you look.
Yeah, and I fear it's a lifelong lesson.
Oh my God. 26-year-old me is also still not listening most of the time. So.
Oh my gosh.
Now it's time for our first segment, Tea and Crumpets, where we tell you what we can't stop talking about this week.
So what is your tea this week?
Bitch. It's Sabrina. It's Sabrina Carpenter's new album, Man's Best Friend.
I need to listen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now listen. My first listen through, I also was having a bad day. So I was just like, But much like Miss Sabrina Carpenter, earworm.
Okay.
So I was like, oh. And so now every day I'm like, do you want the house tour? Like, I'm just, like, going through it. So, like, kind of a lot of, like, pop culture hot takes around this album because the album cover is her, like, on her hands and knees, like, being, like, pulled by her hair. And everyone was like, this is anti-feminist. And then the other people are like, this is kink, honey.
Yeah.
So the album, much like her other stuff, is very kind of, it's just winding her, you know, like, relationships with men and some of the, like, ignoring like red flags and just like how she's showing up in relationship with men, and I just think it's tea. So listen to House Tour.
Okay, House Tour. I'll put it on the list.
Good.
Okay.
What's your tea?
Oh my God, I forgot to put one on here, and then I just thought of it. What was it? It was, I am reading this book called, and I may get some of the title. I think it's The Practice of Groundedness.
Okay.
It's Brad Stulberg. And it's one of those, like, I mean, self-help, but also it's, like, deeply rooted in both, like, the, you know, current science around well-being and also ancient wisdom traditions, which I really appreciate. But it is, you know, self-helpy. And it's one of those where you're like, oh, my God, did they write this literally for me? And I'm highlighting every paragraph. And it's kind of similar to what I might end up exploring, sort of something in the neighborhood for my dissertation. But like for people who are pretty ambitious and driven, like how do you honor that without driving yourself into the ground, right? So I'm really excited. I feel like I need that message really deeply right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just excited to read the rest of the book. And he is an amazing Instagram follow, Brad Stulberg.
Okay.
Check him out.
Now it's time for Step Into My Office, where you get advice from your favorite professionally qualified, personally peculiar therapists.
Dear Em and Val, I've struggled with body image for as long as I can remember. Growing up in the 90s, diet culture has been ingrained in my system. My mom was always on Weight Watchers, and my friends and I swapped Slim Fast shakes like they were snacks. Now, in my 30s, I thought I'd be past all of that. But I still catch myself obsessing over calories, comparing my body to others online, and feeling guilty when I eat something, in quotes, unhealthy. I don't know if what I'm dealing with counts as an eating disorder or just lifelong body shame. It feels exhausting either way. How do I start untangling what's, quote, normal in our culture versus what's actually disordered? And is there really hope for someone who feels like they've been stuck in this cycle since middle school? Sincerely, in a toxic situationship with MyFitnessPal.
Oh, man.
Woof. The MyFitnessPal?
Right.
I'm scared.
Yeah, of like logging. I mean, and yeah, the days of where you had to just log it in your journal.
Yeah.
The Slim Fast too, I was like, whoo. Because when I was like refeeding as a teenager, there wasn't a lot of options. There was probably Ensure, but like that was kind of just for old people.
Yes.
Where I came from, there was no eating disorder treatment or anything. So the deal that I struck with my dietitian was that I would eat a breakfast of a Luna bar and a Slim Fast every day, which was like a fuck ton of calories for me at that time.
Sure.
But it like weird breakfast.
A Luna bar.
A Luna bar and a Slim Fast every day. I can still taste it.
Ugh.
But yeah, man, I think this is a great example of how there's actually, as horrible as it is to sort of like hit a really dysfunctional bottom in a full-blown eating disorder, if you don't hit that, you get to sort of stay stuck in this like low-level disordered eating obsessive place just kind of indefinitely unless you ever choose to work on it, right? So it sounds like that's kind of where the listener is of like, okay, maybe it never got full blown.
Right.
But it's, Jenny Schaefer co-wrote the book Almost Anorexic. Like there's a lot of like more conversations these days around disordered eating and sort of quote unquote subclinical stuff. And it's like, you don't have to accept that as your normal. So there's a lot of strategies that we're going to talk about later in this episode that I think would be applicable here. But I'm curious, like, what comes up for you hearing this?
Well, and I think even just the first thing I focused on was, the 90s component, the diet culture. And so, notoriously, I'm a 99 baby, but my mom, yo-yo diet, Weight Watchers, Atkins, like always doing something. And, that and not in a way of like, I blame my mom. I don't blame my mom at all, just like the culture that she grew up in also, of that time where even just like reading Weight Watchers, I was like, ugh, like it just like has like visceral response for me because again, like not that everything is always so parsed out in black and white, but, like we said, the stuff that we'll talk about later and those like cultural moments, those generational things that are really poignant here. No wonder it's still affecting you, right?
Yeah.
And like also if we flip that on its head now to 2025 of like some of the normalization, even more so of disordered eating on social media, which we'll get to, but that low grade simmer of this being something across your whole life is so intensely you're not alone in that. I feel like a lot of women that I know, same thing, where it's just this thing that's always been there. And so, again, like parsing out really eating disorder or just the body shame.
Right. And even though it is like normalized in the sense of like, that's so typical, it's almost more common than not.
Yeah.
Again, listener, like it doesn't have to be where you stay. There are pathways through because if people can recover from full-blown eating disorders, there can also be recovery and healing from this kind of lower grade disordered eating. It is very possible to reclaim your headspace because that can be one of the like most miserable parts of it, right?
Sure.
Is even if you're not dealing with a lot of physiological symptoms necessarily, if it's occupying that much of your headspace, like, you don't have to live that way.
No. Yeah.
Okay.
Take care, listener. And listen on, there's more stuff to come.
Yes.
And now it's time for the DSM. In our DSM, all varieties of dysfunction, spiraling, and meltdowns are welcome. In this segment, we break down complicated concepts and common misconceptions about mental health, well-being, and tell you what we really think.
Of course, you peeped from the title, and so far this week we're explaining and kind of exploring eating disorders, cultural, generational implications of disordered eating, and kind of parsing out what that means versus eating disorders, and just body image concerns kind of across the generations. So I wanted to open us up, of course, with Eating Disorder 101, more of the psychological, clinical component of this topic today. And so in the way that we define eating disorders, serious mental health conditions characterized by persistent disturbances in eating behaviors and related thoughts and emotions. So this isn't, quote, just about food. It's often about control, shame, self-worth, coping, all of those things. And so I wanted to throw down some relevant criteria and kind of course, this is not the whole picture. This is just a bit of a blurb from the DSM-5 of what is considered eating disorders. So we have anorexia nervosa. So this is restriction of energy intake. So we're looking at low body weight concerns or intense fear of gaining weight and a large disturbance in body image. So how you view yourself versus to what your body actually looks like, the discrepancy. Bulimia nervosa. So this is recurrent binge eating. So eating large amounts of food with just this kind of imbalance or sense of lack of control, not being able to stop. Compensatory behaviors, so vomiting or using laxatives, excessive exercise. So for bulimia, it must occur once a week for 3 months, which even that, I was like, okay, having that clip there. Binge eating disorder, BED, recurrent binge eating without compensatory behaviors. So this is associated with distress, eating rapidly, eating until you are uncomfortably full, eating when not hungry, or hiding or eating in shame, secretive, things like that. So other specified feeding or eating disorder, OSFED, symptoms that are causing distress, but they don't meet full criteria. And this is actually really common and when people are presenting to therapy and things like that. So that diagnosis, I suppose, shows up a lot. And then ARFID, which I feel like really didn't know a lot about, and now it's becoming, ARFID became further on my radar the further I delve into clinical stuff with neurodivergent individuals in particular. So ARFID, avoidant/restrictive food intake disorder. So this is limiting food intake due to sensory issues or concerns, fear of consequences such as choking or your food getting stuck, or kind of just this lack of interest in eating. And ARFID per se isn't necessarily about the controlling of body image. It's really focused on those sensory sensitivities and challenges. So any additions to any of those?
Yeah, I mean, I would say there's been, a lot of controversy over the years with some of the diagnostic criteria, like for instance with anorexia around does a person have to be below 85% of their...
Sick enough, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which there's a literal book called Sick Enough because, a lot of times people will be struggling very significantly and then still feel like they are not quote unquote sick enough to get help. And so that's why we're saying, even to the listener who wrote in that there is no such thing as having to be sick enough to get help and to want to heal your relationship with food and body. But yeah, so it is very possible that someone can be anorexic and be a higher body weight.
Yes.
Right? And if they're losing weight rapidly, they could be losing hair, they could be having severe health issues. That are attributed to that. And then, no one would know, right? Because people just don't assume that someone in a larger body would be restricting or starving themselves. So that's really important. And then also just the insurance. I mean, that's the whole thing of I said, our frenemy, the DSM, and the problem with, how rigid these boxes of diagnoses are and how insurance takes full advantage of that. And for instance, like they might be more likely to cover someone with anorexia or bulimia than someone who's given an OSFED diagnosis, right? So it's stupid, but it is the world that we live in. Yeah. So we try to, get people the care that they need. And there are a lot of, really wonderful treatment center options of different levels of care all across the country and, some internationally too. So some stats that we wanted to throw out. About 9% of the population in the U.S. will experience an eating disorder sometime in their lifetime. And that's like a full-blown eating disorder. That comes from NIDA. And I know people have feelings about NIDA, and I'm not going to get into that whole tangent, but I'm sure that Maintenance Phase probably has an episode about that.
I love Maintenance Phase.
Yeah, that's a great podcast that covers a lot of these issues in depth. And we have known for a long time that eating disorders are among the highest mortality rate of any mental illness, second only to opioid use disorder. Wow. And I would say that even sometimes is underreported in terms of, say, for instance, if someone dies of a heart attack because they were purging, which does happen, that whether or not that actually becomes part of the statistics depends on what goes on that person's death certificate. Was it heart attack or was it bulimia nervosa, right? So probably underreported. Same thing with suicide. That is secondary to the distress of being, caught up and tangled in an eating disorder. So it is a very serious thing that really deserves a lot of research and treatment efforts. Also, individuals with higher body weight have a 2.5 times greater chance of engaging in disordered eating behaviors as people of quote unquote normal weight, and receive an eating disorder, a clinical diagnosis of an eating disorder half as frequently as people who are considered normal weight or underweight. So going back to the point I was talking about earlier, right, where it's like, well, there's a lot of assumptions of like, oh, you're fine. Like, you don't need to worry. So, and there is more awareness now around like binge eating disorder than there has been in the past. But even so, there should not be an assumption, A, that someone who's in a larger body does binge eat. Right. Or B, that if they have an eating disorder, that's the one that they have, right? Because we just don't know.
Yes.
And then LGBTQ youth who have been diagnosed with an eating disorder at some point had nearly 4 times greater odds of attempting suicide in the past year compared to those who had never suspected or been given an eating disorder diagnosis. So again, the correlation between eating disorders and suicidality is significant.
Yeah, the other stat about the higher body weight, it's one of those things where like I can reflect as someone in a bigger body where I think probably it was right as I was starting my grad program, just was like in a really stressful transition and period of my life. And so I found myself more often really engaging in disordered eating and restriction, and just like straight up not eating throughout the day, like getting by on a coffee and just like not taking care of myself. And I'd gone back to the doctor after not going for so long, of course. And I was like congratulated. They were like, "You've like lost 20 pounds since we saw you last." And I was job. Like,
"Yeah, I'm not."
They were like, "Yeah, what are you here for today?" And I was like, "Antidepressants." Like I like am not taking care of myself, and you congratulating me upon losing 20 pounds feels like shit because I wasn't doing it quote unquote the right way. I was hurting myself. So it was tough. So kind of, moving into that pipeline of like, what is disordered eating then? So these are patterns of irregular eating behaviors that, again, don't meet the full criteria for an eating disorder, but still very negatively affect physical and mental health. So some examples are patterns you may exhibit or have noticed with other folks in your life. Chronic dieting, or again, that yo-yo dieting. So just constantly going back and forth between different diets or, restriction, skipping meals, restricting calories. Obsession with clean eating, which is also called orthorexia. And I feel like there's probably even a bigger increase for me in understanding orthorexia over the past couple of years. I really didn't know what that was until a few years ago. So that's, you know, like completely cutting out sugar or dairy or, you know, things like that where it's an obsession around it. Frequent guilt or shame after eating, very rigid rules about food or exercise. And then using exercise primarily to earn or burn off calories. And this matters because people oscillate between disordered eating and diagnosable eating disorders probably across their lifetime, as we've been talking about. And then the cultural normalization of disordered eating. Cheat meals, detoxes, fasting, intermittent fasting, anything where, again, there's too much preoccupation around it is making it acceptable, and how these things are reflected culturally in society at large and then intergenerationally between families. A lot of my, you know, concepts around food are because I was watching my mom, because I was listening to the women in my family talking about their bodies or juice cleansing or you just not taking care of yourselves. So yeah, it's a big one.
And it does feel like the noise is louder than ever because
Oh my gosh.
of the nature of social media and content creation, that if content creators are going to continue to churn out more and more content, which they have to do to like stay relevant and try to go viral and grow their audience, then they are constantly throwing out, well, here's what you need to be doing. Well, here's what you're doing wrong.
Right.
Like all of that. And so it's, if it feels like it's up to 11, like it really is, right? And one thing that I do want to touch on is, because I used to have a misunderstanding about this, is, you know, back when I was working in residential treatment, and this was, you know, over 10 years ago, and I've been vegan for 9 years, and that's, you know, for ethical reasons. But at that point in time, my assumption was if somebody comes in here who's vegan, they're just using that as a convenient, you know, way to restrict, right? And it's orthorexic, and it's like inherently like, why are you so rigid about this? Why don't you have anything that even has a little bit of dairy in it or a little bit of egg or whatever? And of course, like becoming vegan and learning about that world, I have realized, like, number one, yes, it can absolutely be tangled up in disordered eating, and that has to be looked at. And there's ways of doing that. My friend Jen Friedman wrote a book about veganism and eating disorders with Routledge Press that is very worth checking out for anyone interested in that. Because yes, it can get tangled up, but it's not inherently so, right? So it's, you know, things to look at are like, okay, is that person being congruent with other choices? Like, are they wearing leather? Are they, you know, doing these other things? Like, is it sort of like just the food piece and they're using that as, it really is rigidity? Or is it something that is part of their ethical sort of framework? And the unfortunate thing is a lot of treatment centers still do just assume that it's disordered. And so they won't often support people coming in on a vegan diet. And they'll say, well, if you're going to come here, you're going to need to have some dairy, or you're going to need to have, and that to me is so unethical. Like, I would refuse at this point. And there are a couple treatment centers now. Alsana is kind of one that was on the leading edge of that was like, hey, we will work with ethical vegans. Like, yes, we will sift through to see what is the eating disorder and what is kind of the ethical choice, but we will get them the food that they need, you know? And that's, to me, like, the benefit of this day and age is that we have all of these options available, right? To where it's like, okay, so we're not going to let you skip dessert night because we have, you know, soy milk ice cream or whatever, right? So it's not about like just get the convenient excuse. But I think that's an important thing to think about with not assuming that veganism is rigid or orthorexic, but knowing that it could be.
Sure.
Yeah. Cool. So looking at the generational influences that we've started kind of hinting at, speaking for the millennials.
Well, yes.
As the listener described, that peak 90s, 2000s, the low-rise gene with the completely flat stomach that is just like biologically impossible after the age of 14. That heroin chic aesthetic, the Kate Moss, the, you know, all of it, which of course this fashion is cyclical, right? So it was Twiggy in the 60s, and then they're, back in the 90s, that was kind of in again. And even, there was a little bit of that coming back around a couple of years ago. It's never fully gone away, right? But there are these sort of like fashion trends that sort of make this sort of cyclically popular. The Kardashians are sort of part of my generation, right? Yeah. And like seeing like when a couple years ago, like it's like, what happened to Kim? And like, who is this person? Right. Oh my gosh. So yeah, the tabloid culture.
Wow.
Oh my God. Like
relentless.
Yes. It's seared into my brain. Of course, magazines are a dying breed.
Sure.
But we still see them at the grocery store. And
people of it all.
Yes. And just always the weight loss stories and everything. Of course, all of the fad diets, like you mentioned, Atkins, South Beach. Oh my God, the Special K diet. I get angry about like certain things. I'm like, what is Special K? There's no nutrients in it whatsoever. It's like
is that like the cereal?
Yes, like somebody crushed up a vitamin and put that in there, and like the freeze dried fucking strawberries. I used to eat that all the time too. But I'm like, no, you're going to be hungry 30 minutes later.
Yes, deeply.
So, also, oh my God, at one point, I, in high school, went to Barnes & Noble, and I picked up this book that was, I forget what it was called, but it was something like The Miracle, whatever. And it was, you were supposed to drink, like, several tablespoons of olive oil. Like at least once a day. And that was like, oh my God, you'll just be like so satiated. And like, you just won't even, you'll like only want like one meal a day. Right. So
sure, because you're shitting out olive evu, bitch. Like I'm scared.
I only did it, I think, a few days because I was just like,
okay, wow.
Oh my God, I know. It's
freaky.
dark. Okay. And then of course the Biggest Loser. Like a new documentary
I've
about
watched
that.
it.
I need to watch it.
It's only 3 episodes. I binged it.
Oh my God.
And 2 nights ago in one night.
Jillian has gone off the rails.
Honey, and she was not.
Never really on the rails.
No.
But yes, obviously like exercise framed as punishment.
Yep.
Come on.
Grew up with that.
Come on. I'm so bad. I had a piece of pie. I'm so bad.
Foods are sinful. They're naughty.
Oh my gosh. And of course, millennials, God bless, we are more likely than our previous generations to seek therapy, but we did grow up with extremely normalized disordered eating and body image.
Yeah, that's what's interesting for me as someone that's like in a way a zillennial, right? Like I sit in that cusp where like I was watching The Biggest Loser and, I'm watching the adults around me go to like Weight Watchers or those meetings. I think my grandmother would go to whatever the version of that is in the UK where, you're doing the support
group. Doing the scale in front of everyone.
Slimming World. That's what it was called.
Slimming World.
I'm like, what? So, but with that, and now further into, 2025 and the other realms, there's a lot more exposure to the body positivity / neutrality movements, which we'll get into in a little bit. But of course, the social media is the double-edged sword. So the inclusive representation of seeing people in different bodies, working out, approaching, but then there is kind of the what I eat in a day / food content in general, where I'm watching someone like in a small body eating like the 6 crumble cookies of the week and like drinking an entire Pyrex glass of milk. And so, and then the comments are like, well, it would be interesting if a fat person was doing this, and so like the internet kind of commentary around these things is like a little bit murky. Of course, filters, Facetune. I feel like, why was I 14 years old, like taking selfies, listening to Taylor Swift, and then Facetuning them for Instagram for people in my fucking middle school? Like, nobody cares, queen. Like, nobody cares. Why do you care? And then just, the Ozempidemic or the GLP-1, which we'll get into. But, a lot, I can't turn on Hulu without seeing Serena Williams, a very decorated athlete, being like, this is why I use GLP-1s. And, so it's just a bit discombobulating. Yeah. I think we're just seeing so much content all the time. Yeah. And the what I eat in the days in particular, where it's really awesome, and like the normalization around that, and then sometimes again just the how people interact with that content is really interesting to me.
Yeah.
And so of course greater openness about mental health across Gen Z. We're all depressed and scared, and so
and also like the what I eat in a day, it's like it all depends on who's posting it and where they're at in their life. Like that can be really helpful, like in normalizing. Like I think of Sydney Cummings, who is this YouTube trainer that I love, and I'm doing her program right now. But she has like I think a pretty healthy relationship. She does talk about like, oh, make sure you're getting your protein and like know your macros and all of that. But she like seeing what she eats in a day, I'm like, oh, like she's just these very normal foods, and she's not really rigid, and she had this really cool birthday cake. And so I think it can be really normalizing, but then it's also like, if it's someone who's in a bad spot or they're like not well with food, they're basically just giving a how-to, which is like in my day, you had to read that on Tumblr, not see a whole video on here's exactly what I ate.
And then you
like,
get to see it in 15 seconds or less, and then you're on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. So, you know, that openness about it is good till it's not, you know? And so there's willingness amongst young people to seek help, which is great. But then, of course, the rising rates of body dissatisfaction and disordered eating, you know, and I see a lot of comments about people that are, whether it's beauty content or fashion content in the realm of like body checking, where people are starting the videos out in like their underwear and like how people interact with that content. So it's a really interesting time.
I love seeing the quote unquote before and after ones where like a trainer or someone will be like, take 2 pictures, and one of them is just kind of them like, you know, you're holding that strong posture, you're like strengthening your core or whatever, and you look super fit, and then they're like, and this was 2 minutes later when I just relaxed myself, and this is the actual same exact fucking body. I'm like, yes,
I do like those. Those are great. So yeah, just during like recognizing some warning signs, right? So kind of what we were talking about in the realm of disordered eating, but whether you're noticing this within yourself or your loved ones, people around you, again, just this preoccupation with weight or food or calories or exercise or literally all of the above. One that I think people don't realize until you're kind of there is avoiding social situations involving food. So whether it's some of that, you know, I don't want to be eating in front of this person, or
they don't have like food that feels safe for me at this place.
Where you're kind of, you know, picking around or, you know, so kind of that avoidance. Those physical symptoms. Are you dizzy? Are you losing hair? Is your GI just all fucked up and out of whack? Are you having irregular periods? You know, like the degree of severity across those physical symptoms. Also just like not feeling good. Straight up. Like feeling hungry or feeling pains in the stomach, and then the being taught to ignore those cues of your body. And then, just in general, the emotional distress tied to food and body. Are you just constantly ragging on yourself internally, externally, socially, not, you know, just how are you showing up and how you think and talk about food and your body.
And of course, like we kind of said earlier, people who are in like full-blown eating disorder symptoms, whether that means you're severely restricting your intake or even, you know, like you're just not getting enough of a certain type of food like carbohydrates or something, or you're purging or, you know, excessive exercise, that can show up on your labs, and you can see like maybe there's certain, you know, minerals or why can't I think of words right now, but there are things, electrolytes, that if they're out of balance can really take a dark turn quickly. But the important thing, going back to the idea of sick enough, is so many times like people who are in that struggle will almost use, if they get labs back and there's like nothing really wrong, they'll be like, well, see, you know, if I'm still okay, then I'm not doing good enough at this, you know, like I need to try harder. I need to be more restrictive. And so labs are not always an indicator that things are fine, but they can be important to do to catch warning signs of things are off course. So that is a really important piece. And also, ideally, if anyone is struggling with disordered eating behaviors, try to go to practitioners who understand this stuff, right? Because the education that medical doctors get is horrific.
Yeah.
And so they can often say or do things that can just, you know, intensify someone's negative feelings, or they can miss really big red flags. Same thing with dietitians. If a dietitian or therapist is not informed about this, then they can be counterproductive. So specialists all the way. And then we wanted to talk about some of the frameworks that might be helpful to explore. And, you know, some of them will resonate for some people, others might resonate more for other people, and that's all good. Right? Exactly. So body positivity, you know, I'm thinking like, you know, back to, you know, the aughts and like the first Dove Real Beauty campaign, which is like a case study in the advertising world of like, you know, a successful campaign because it spoke to something that people were not seeing, which is real humans in the media at that time. So body positivity is ultimately a movement rooted in fat activism that challenges systemic anti-fat bias and affirms that all bodies deserve respect, visibility, and care. And of course, you know, that's, I would say the when the movement is going well, that's what it's really about.
Sure.
But anything can get co-opted, right?
Yeah.
And so body positivity can get co-opted by, you know, brands who are sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, the equivalent of like greenwashing or pinkwashing. Yeah. Like just trying to like, you know, increase their sales, but really like none of their models are over a size 10 or whatever.
Right.
Like, so I
think of Aerie, like the modern, like the Dove campaign to Aerie, to where they weren't like, you know, they weren't having models that were super thin, and there was more like they were showing cellulite, but like certain at a certain point you're not going above like an XL. So like, are you that accessible really? If people can't buy your shit? It's
like body positive, but only within a certain parameter, right? And why this matters, obviously, it's like, again, when it's done well, it can help shift the cultural narrative from your body is a problem to be fixed to, guess what? You're worthy exactly as you are. Right? And no matter what. And that it's really about like being able to see wider versions of what is considered beautiful, worthy, like all of the above, right? It is that personal self-love and acceptance, but it's also political.
Sure.
Challenges with body positivity is that it keeps the focus on the aesthetic, because it is sort of like, well, you know, like love what you see in the mirror. And I'm like, well, bitch, it's still not the most important thing about you. Like your body is the paintbrush, not the canvas. Yeah. So some people do feel that pressure to like, oh my God, I'm supposed to love my body. And if I don't, then I'm not like a good feminist, or I'm not like evolved. And I think that's a whole other type of fucked up. And it can feel unrealistic, especially in early recovery. And the body is not an apology. I would say, I mean, there are so many, gosh, I wish I had put more thought into sharing resources here, but we can put more in the show notes. Yeah. But the body is not an apology, I would say, takes us a little bit into the body neutrality space. Yeah.
It felt too far.
Yeah, it's probably appropriate for both because, I mean, and gosh, the book is sitting right over there on our bookshelf, and it's just, I do think it is like it's a celebration of like, she's just on the cover, like sprawled out in like a bed of roses. And so it's like all of the above. But yes, there are a lot of great resources out there. Honestly, like just like following people who are fat on Instagram and who are, whether it's like they're showing their fashion or their, you know, whatever it is, it's like being able to have that exposure to seeing more versions of beauty.
Yeah. Maybe I'll write down like some of my favorite creators that are like in the bigger body, because I love those clients.
Yes. And that's put really, in the show notes. It's good exposure too for people who like have this deeply ingrained conditioning of like, only certain things are attractive. And it's like, I'm sorry, how much time have you spent looking at this?
Right. Yes. So body positivity, and I think people feel is, you know, in the realm of body neutrality, where people kind of flip-flop around between, but more of the definition or parsed out of what body neutrality is. So I would say a more recent approach, emphasizing acceptance and functionality over the appearance. So the focus is not necessarily on loving how your body looks, but appreciating what it allows you to do. So hugging your kid, picking your children up, or walking your dog, or laughing with your friends. So this matters because it's often that middle ground for those that are, again, struggling with that body love, feeling that that's maybe too aspirational, or they're not there yet, or they don't know if they can ever be there in that way. And so it's less about the positive feelings per se, and more about reducing that constant internal judgment. As well as external. So, I hate my stomach can go to my stomach digests food and keeps me alive. And so in my personal journey, body neutrality has been important.
Yes.
Because my relationship to my body is very fraught and avoidant. And so when I'm walking up a flight of stairs, I'm like, oh, whatever. And then I'm like, my body carried me up a flight of stairs. Kind of like,
legs.
Thank you, legs. Like, and people, I don't know, I've approached it and people think it's cringe or whatever, and I'm like, we just at our resting, so much is happening inside of us at all times that we don't ever think of, and like that's actually pretty fucking cool.
Thank you, spleen.
Thanks, spleen, for
I don't know what you do, but you do spleening.
The liver is livering, So this resource I just threw down was for some articles from the Center for Body Trust, which was kind of interesting. And, again, we'll kind of backfill some extra resources that we love. But I think body neutrality, I think the flitting between positivity and neutrality. In my personal sphere, I can have body neutrality within myself. But body positivity, I find really easy when I'm, like, following my favorite fat creators, where I'm like, okay, bitch, you look T.
Yes.
And then it's like, but my fat doesn't fat that way, or, like those thoughts. So it's the neutrality has been helpful for me.
Yeah. And I also think with the positivity piece, like, it doesn't have to be like I must love every single thing about my body.
Right.
But are there a couple of things aesthetically that you're like, damn, I have nice eyes, or like my hair, or whatever. Yeah. Especially the things that are either, don't change about you, or that you are choosing, like your hairstyle, your tattoos, or whatever. Another resource that I love for body neutrality, and this is kind of a wild title, but it's provocative on purpose, is Living with Your Body and Other Things You Hate by Emily Sandoz. It's from an ACT perspective. And so ACT is sort of like, okay, what if actually, your body's not the problem, but actually your body image is not the problem either. It's your relationship with your body image, right? Yeah. So we actually don't need to fix your body image and make you love everything about your body. We actually just need to help you get better at unhooking from all the body image noise so that you can live your life and focus on the things that you value, right?
Love that.
So it's a great book and has a lot of good exercises to explore. Another thing we wanted to talk about is the idea of intuitive eating, which is a framework that was developed by two dietitians in the 90s, Evelyn Tribole and Elise Resch. It's about helping people rebuild trust with their bodies and rejecting diet culture. They created these 10 principles. Some of them are rejecting diet mentality, honoring hunger, respecting fullness, discovering satisfaction. There is one that is one of the last principles of gentle nutrition, because, I think that people can hear about intuitive eating, and if they only do a very superficial examination of it, they're sort of like, oh, so I just basically eat whatever I want, right? I just my body wants a half gallon of ice cream and I just eat a half gallon, and it's no, you're missing the point, right?
Entirely.
Because your body doesn't actually probably want that, right? Your brain might, you're whatever you're sort of using the food to function as might want that. But if you're really developing that connection with your body, that's usually probably not it. Or at the very least, sometimes there is a little bit of a rebound if you're coming out of a lot of long time of a very restrictive mindset. Yeah, sometimes there is a little bit of well, shit, I'm going to give myself more ice cream and this and this. And but that's not usually where you'll land.
Right.
Because when we get to that principle of gentle nutrition, it is starting to look at actually my body, I think, is like craving veggies, right? Like when I don't get enough of them, I notice that I crave them, and that, you know, there are foods, I think it's important to say, that while we try to get out of the diet mentality of good foods, bad foods, because that keeps people stuck in this restrict binge mentality that's just not helpful. But some foods are more nutrient dense than others, right? And I love that they call it play food instead of junk food. Like I can integrate play food into my day-to-day eating, but it doesn't need to be the vast majority of what I eat, or my body's going to feel like shit, right? So, yeah, the challenge is it can feel scary or chaotic at first if you've been disconnected from your body's cues, your hunger cues for a long time, if you're used to sort of overriding those cues. It can be helpful, you know, depending on where you're at on the spectrum of disordered eating. Obviously, it can be helpful to work with a dietitian and therapist who specialize in this if you're going to explore that. And I will say that it is not appropriate for people who are in the full-blown eating disorder and in early recovery, because like your eating disorder voice is too tangled up. And so if you're just like, what does my body want? Only salad, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, it can really, the more that you practice it more deeply, it can help people reconnect with their innate hunger and fullness cues. It can remove that more morality from food and just help us look at it more functionally, right? Like how can this food serve me?
Cool. And then one of the last ones wanted to throw down is health at every size, aka the abbreviation HACE, right? Is it HACE? HACE, yeah, HACE. So this is a paradigm created by Dr. Lindo Bacon, love, that focuses on weight inclusivity, health enhancement, eating for well-being, respectful care, prioritizing healthy behaviors rather than someone's body size. So I feel like there's, you'll see some MDs now that have like, that market themselves as or talk about or utilize HACE principles in their practice, therapists, dietitians, things like that. So what matters for health at every size, of course, is it's countering the myth that weight is the primary indicator of health. Yeah. This is really important for me as someone, as a fat person. It's, you know, supporting the sustainable health habits without the harm of chronic dieting. And yeah, this is, again, something that I never learned about until I started at the Gaia Center. I'd never even heard that before. This wasn't something that was discussed in my graduate program. So it's been an interesting thing to learn about and to honestly talk to people about. Just because there is so much stigma, you know, very, very historically, we look at the BMI, and please go listen to the maintenance phase episode about the BMI. That totally changed my life. Yeah. Aubrey Gordon and, oh no, I forget.
I don't remember.
Love him though, King. Fantastic. But, you know, the Association for Size Diversity and Health has further educational things around this realm, which is interesting. Yeah. It's been cool.
One of my favorite resources of theirs is this like 3-minute YouTube video called Poodle Science. Okay. That they sort of use dogs as a metaphor to like show like if poodles are sort of the medical establishment. Yeah. And they're like, well, they think that everyone should be a poodle. And it's like, well, guess what? Some of us are mastiffs, right? Yes. And if you try to, you know, make a mastiff a poodle, like, it's going to be bad news, right? Sure. So, yeah, and I think that HACE is something that, again, just like intuitive eating, if somebody hears about it and they have not dug deeper to actually more fully understand the ethos and the principles, it would be easy to poke holes in and be like, what do you mean you can be healthy at every size? Like if you're, you know, you can't even walk and you can't even, whatever. So number one, there's sort of the philosophy of, and this is, you know, controversial, but like that nobody owes you health. Like, yes, there are elements of everything related to individual health that could be, you know, said to be public health issues. So like it, you know, in ways of smoking as a public health issue that affects us all if we're, you know, if we look at all of the tentacles of that, right? But ultimately, nobody owes anybody else to be quote unquote healthy to begin with. Yeah. And then also just that idea of it's that there are other metrics that are more valuable for really determining where someone's level of health is.
Sure.
Like biometrics that, when you get labs and you do your EKGs and things like that. And that's the thing that gets missed when people are looking purely from a BMI standpoint, is someone could have a high BMI but have other excellent biometrics.
Sure.
And if their doctor is like, well, you should lose weight because your BMI, it's just stupid, right? So it's just more nuanced, as everything is.
Sure.
And speaking of nuanced, is the great GLP-1 debate, right?
The ozempidemic.
The thing that I like to say about this, and then I want to hear your thoughts too, is like, I think that part of what we know about body weight and size is this idea of, while certain life things can influence this, that whether it's genetics or whatever, that people have their sort of natural set point range that they tend to be at, right? If they're not, say, eating in a really disordered way, they might tend to have a pretty natural set point range. And that natural set point is not always going to agree with, like, for instance, what a BMI chart says their body should be at, right?
Sure.
So some people just naturally are going to have higher set points. And the only way, if that person either just wants to lose weight, whether it's for aesthetics or they feel like they really need to because, say, they have difficulty with their knees because they're carrying extra weight. If that person wants to take GLP-1s, instead of the only other way they can reduce their weight is to be continuously starving themselves for the rest of time, then I'm like, please take the GLP-1s, right? So I think the problem is we shouldn't look at it as like, oh, great, yay, everyone can be thin now.
Right.
Or because you can take that, you should, right? Like it's still, there needs to be a baseline level of acceptance, compassion, dignity, in terms of regardless what size of body someone's in. But I think that the judgment around people who choose to take this is also kind of shitty, especially for people if it's coming from someone who is in a thin body and they're like, I just don't get why, Adele
you get the
would
easy way out.
Right. Yeah. Or like, I just like her in a bigger body. It's like, well, bitch, that's not your decision, because maybe there's reasons that you don't know that someone felt like that was the right move for them. So, and what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like it's such a intertwining, like, I feel like I have such a complicated relationship with all of this right now. Off your point, one thing that I'm acutely aware of, other people's bodies, none of my fucking business.
Amen.
That
could be the episode.
And, like, that really could be it, So, like, again, the choices that someone individually is making for their health overall is well and truly none of my business, as I wish for other people to perceive about me. It's none of your business either. So I think the normalization of that needs to happen more often. And then, of course, just the avenues where, again, so many things can be fine as they are until there's pipelines of it where they're being abused or misused or misrepresented. And I mean, people can really go into all of the, like, we don't know a lot of the, like, long-term effects of medication. Sure, right? And it's not lost on me about, like, from, I don't know, the 80s, 90s, where, like, fen-phen was a thing. And then the FDA was like, oh, just kidding. People are dying off of this. And so some of the associations made from that into the GLP-1 of it all, where America or society loves a miracle drug, right? We love a miracle drug, and science is amazing. And I don't know, I just think it's very nuanced. I don't seek to, like, I said the ozempidemic, and so, I was being a bit cheeky, tongue-in-cheek about it. It's none of my fucking business. I have people in my life that are on GLP-1s, and some of them are having a great time, and some of them are not. And so that's even just been illuminating to me as well, where some people are really sick, and someone in my life has lost 100 pounds from not really changing anything, just eating less, taking the GLP-1, and like exercise and other what they've eaten has not changed,
and that's,
which is curious.
Right, that's one thing that's kind of opened my mind a little bit, but is like it's so case by case, because I have heard of people kind of secondhand who like are like, oh yeah, I'm on this and I'm losing weight, but they're having so much GI distress, and it's like, okay, we don't necessarily want to be losing weight because we're not absorbing nutrients,
right?
But then there's other people that I've talked to like directly who've been like, yeah, actually I feel fine. And it's, you know, I don't feel like deprived, or, you know, I feel energized. And so
it's like, so case by case.
It's so case by case. And I will say that what the media also loves is drama and fear mongering. And so sometimes you'll be like, oh my God, Ozempic phase, or like, you're losing muscle mass. And it's like, there's a great episode of Science Versus that kind of breaks some of those things down and is like, actually, what the science says is people who are losing weight on GLP-1s are not losing any more percentage muscle mass than just anyone losing weight for any reason.
In general. Sure.
Right? So it's like, you know, be aware of kind of how the media tends to be. That's a great episode. I don't know if they've done another one on it since then, but yeah.
Yeah, it's case by case.
Yep.
I was talking to someone recently, we were talking about GLP-1s, and I was like, I think I feel about GLP-1s in the way that I feel about IUDs. Like, I have the Mirena, and, like, other people are like, I couldn't have that one. And I'm like, okay you know, like, it really just depends, right? And everyone hates that answer, but, like, it does just depend. The cultural aspects of it are challenging, you know, like, it's inauthentic for me to say that I'm not struggling with the concept overall of GLP-1s as it impacts my personal life. As someone that's fat, but it's also just like, dude, like, it's everyone's bodies are not my business. I gotta just, you know, let other people do my own shit. So well, but for real, of course, our relationships with food and bodies do not exist in a vacuum. They are shaped by families, our society, culture, generational stuff, just all of the messages that we have been absorbing since birth, honey. If you have struggled, obviously, please know that you are not alone. You are a human living in a society that definitely profits off of your insecurity, and healing is not about forcing yourself to love every inch of yourself if that is not your truth. Ultimately, can we pivot to finding freedom from shame or learning to trust your body, really no matter your age, your size, or your history.
There it is.
There it is.
And now, our musical segment. Now that's what I call Okay, where Emerson and I each share a song with each other each week as representatives of our respective generations. We tell you a little bit about the song or artist, and then we press pause, we share the song with each other, and then we come back for our live reactions. And we're capturing it all on a Spotify playlist linked in the show notes for you.
My song this week is this like haunting tearjerker of a 90s rock song called Anna's Song by Silverchair, which is an Australian band. And the lead singer, Daniel Johns, had struggled with depression and anorexia. So he wrote this song. Anna is this kind of, I mean, and it's poetic, right? And when you're writing a song, it makes sense to sort of personify it in this way. The personification is sort of a thing, right? With like Jenny Schaefer's, I'm looking at the books right now and all I'm seeing is Goodbye Ed, Hello Me, which is the follow-up to Life Without Ed. There it is. So this idea of like, if Ed is sort of like a separate part of you, right, that you can dialogue with, that you can acknowledge is not me. So there is, you know, there is a helpful thing about externalizing, but in the sort of 90s online Tumblr world of it all, there was also sort of a romanticization that happened with like Anna and Mia for anorexia and bulimia of like, this is my girl, like she's my bestie. And so it's kind of gross, but also again, when it's used in this way of like a poetic kind of songwriting, he's not really romanticizing it in this song. He's more just like talking about this kind of struggle with this thing.
Interesting.
And also, as I was looking this up, I did not know that Daniel was married after he was doing better. He was married in the mid-aughts to Natalie Imbruglia for 5 years. So just Australian power couple.
Wait, what's her song?
Nothing's fun, I'm torn. I'm all out of faith. Yeah.
Wait, shut up.
Okay.
Well, goddamn. Guys, the video's intense.
It was.
We were
Trigger
both
warning.
just like, trigger warning. I'm also just like, I feel like I say this every fucking time that you bring one. It's just like those millennial ass songs where I'm like, what I wouldn't give to just like be a dude at that time that was like, like it's tea. He sounds good as fuck.
And the hair. We had some good hairstyles.
I think so.
Yeah.
Okay.
What's your song?
So I picked a very uber viral song via the interwebs. This song went super viral on TikTok in 2022, which is how I discovered her. Maddie Zahm, I think that's how you say your name, Maddie girl. If you're listening, you're not, but that's okay. Her song Fat Funny Friend. So she competed on season 16 of American Idol, which I thought was tea because this song is co-written by Idol alumni Katie Turner, and I've almost put her songs on. Okay. So like
Future guest.
Yes.
Okay.
Like kind of really love her stuff. But her discography kind of in general to me kind of, the array of topics of being raised religious, coming out as queer, body image, identity. So this song just resonated in so many ways. I think there was, it made me think of the movie, The Deaf. Did you ever watch that movie?
No, wait.
Designated Ugly Fat Friend.
I don't think so.
Never watched it because I was just like, this,
yeah.
But like very culturally, like was a beloved movie, I would say. So that kind of, the trope of like being the ugly fat friend or just like what that means, which is just like my whole adolescence and young adulthood and onward. So yeah, I'm excited for you to hear that.
Damn.
Right?
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm like, first of all, that's my kind of pop song.
Oh,
like
sure.
just beautiful voice.
Really great
and
voice.
Just, fabulous lyrics and melody and just so good. And then one of the things, the video was fantastic too.
I know,
it was
even just for lyric video,
yeah, the
but
lyrics,
it had
but it was
elements.
also like pictures and photos of her across many years. And one of the things is like you see her in that video at many different sizes.
Yes.
And of course we can infer, some of that is, I'm sure, yo-yo dieting, but also like, and what you said earlier about like, caution, do not compliment someone on weight loss because you do not know how they quote unquote accomplished that.
Right.
Right. And yet I think that goes both ways as far as like, if someone, like I know people who have been in larger bodies can sometimes get hate if they do lose weight.
Oh,
right.
Yeah.
And so it's like that too of like, it goes back to like, it's their own fucking business.
Yeah.
But like, that's just another thing is like, I hope she hasn't received hate for if she at moments has been, in a smaller body, but I'm sure she has. And it's just the complexity of it all.
Yeah. Oh, there's like a whole betrayal element, I think, to that. There's probably like a whole episode we need to do on fat phobia at large.
Yeah.
Like, and just what it means, I would love to have like another a voice in there about that. But yeah, she's cool. And I think she has openly talked about having maybe like a gastric sleeve or stuff like that.
Yeah.
So, and then back to the Adele of it all, where there was quite the like cultural of like,
how dare she?
Yeah. And like, can you sing anymore because you're not fat? All those things.
Wow.
It's an interesting.
Wild.
And now for our last segment of the show, welcome to Fire Dumpster Phoenix. It is rough out there, y'all, and we need all the hope we can get. It's time to go dumpster diving for some positive news and rise from the leftover Happy Meal ashes together.
So, Valerie, what is your good news this week?
Oh my gosh. I just brought because this was perfectly snippeted already, so I'm just going to read this. This comes from the Monitor. A biodegradable mushroom kayak proved seaworthy. Oh my God. Okay, so mycologist Sam Shoemaker,
Love.
Sam Shoemaker, built the vessel using mycelium, the root-like structure of fungi, which he cultivated in a mold and dried for months before testing it at sea.
Wow.
He paddled 26.4 miles from Catalina Island to San Pedro last month, and the material, which is lightweight, buoyant, and biodegradable, offers promise as an alternative to plastic. He said, I'm pleased with how far this project has gone, but there's a long way to go. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, it's giving me a little bit of hope because we do need to be helping companies come up with some better ideas for single-use plastics.
Wow. Okay. How fun. All right. I saw this one, an animal story. It's going to get me every time, y'all. So, a TikToker shared his story of inquiring at a restaurant, Cheddar's.
Oh, yeah. We have a Cheddar's.
Of course, we know a Cheddar's. And their unforgettable response to his dog's last meal. Oh. So his username is Cousin Homer, I believe, from Missouri. He's a singer and multi-instrumentalist posting on TikTok, of course. He called Cheddar's and asked for the best juicy steak with no sides. And they were like, well, are you sure? Like, you know, just like have the sides. And he was like, it's for my dog. And I don't think she'll like eat any of it other than maybe like a few French fries. You know, and essentially, like, this is, like, her last steak. So, like, giving
before
her...
a scheduled euthanasia.
Before a scheduled euthanasia that evening, I believe. So, he shows up to get the food, and, you know, the people on staff, like, had greeted him and came out and gave him a card, and they'd all signed it with their condolences, and they comped the meal. And, I don't know, I feel like there's, like, a cynical part sometimes when these stories happen, because then Cheddar's was, like... You know, they'd made some kind of thing of like, we were so grateful to do this. And everyone's like, corporations. And I'm like, listen, I get it. And also, like, just like these threads of humanity, like, really keep me grounded as someone very, like, existentially anxious and everything like that. So, Bella, you know, his bestie of 13 years, she got her blowout last meal of a big old juicy steak. And just like a really sweet human moment. And like pet grief, we need to do a whole episode on that when I'm because we both have a moment there, you know. But hug your dogs and cats and puppies, and thanks Cheddar's for, like, you know, having some humanity.
Right. And, like, you know, let's be real. Altruism has always had an element that, like, it feels good.
Yeah.
And so it's, like, fine. If a company also benefits from that, it doesn't mean that there wasn't, like, genuine human care
behind
in that,
it.
too.
Right.
So I just, like, let us have something, for God's sakes.
God damn it.
All right, listeners.
That's all we have for this week.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
This has been another episode of But For Real, produced by Valerie Martin and Emerson Ryder and edited by Sean Conklin.
But For Real is a Gaia Center production. The Gaia Center offers individual, couples, and group therapy for clients across Tennessee and in person in our Nashville office, as well as coaching for clients worldwide. For show notes or to learn more about our work, visit GaiaCenter.co or find us on Instagram at the Gaia Center and at But For Real Pod.
But For Real is intended for education and entertainment and is not a substitute for mental health treatment.
Also, since we host this podcast primarily as humans rather than clinicians, we are not shy here about sharing our opinions on everything from snacks and movies to politicians and social issues.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode.
See you next time, bestie.